Okay.
What's the name of your street?
Me?
No, no,
So you know my street.
yes.
Okay, let's go ahead and get started, if we could. Our next item is the proposal for a budget amendment to provide funding to acquire properties at tax sale. I have Mr. Stevenson and Ms. Glanz on this memo. Are you presenting this? Or,
I'm going to be presenting.
okay, you're presenting.
It's going to be a second.
I wasn't sure who was presenting, who was following up, or providing info, sorry.
We're going to have some more explanation with the next item also to go along with this. It's kind of flip-flop the way it's put on, but I'll explain. I'm presenting it for the mayor until he comes back in, so that's why I'm not a little bit organized right now. I'm sorry. We have a list of, and that's what I'm trying to get my hands on.
List of properties.
List of properties we want to allocate funds to buy at tax sale. What we have is we took a list of vacant properties that we have currently with the city off of our vacant building registration, houses that have basically been abandoned. And we compared that to the list of properties that are going up for tax sale currently this year. So really, these properties have just kind of been left by the wayside by the property owners. And we would like to acquire or to allocate the funds for these properties to buy them at tax sale this year when they go up for tax sale in June. I think it's mid-June, I want to say around the 15th.
I have a quick question before you go through those. What have we done with those? Did we purchase 5 last year?
Yeah, I
It'll
think
be a
3
4.
of them are about done. I
There's
think.
4.
Shani,
Yeah.
could you bring your microphone?
They're,
Isn't it about 3 of them that we're just about ready to
yeah.
be,
It's-
that we
It's 3 or
have?
4.
Yeah.
It's 3 or 4. I'm not sure the exact. I can give you a few addresses. I'm not sure if there's an extra one in there.
This is not counting the Germania Circle houses we're talking about.
No.
This is the tax sale houses, the
See,
ones,
I
when
was-
it's over with, we'll own them.
Yeah, because I thought what we were gonna do, and maybe I'm mistaken, is that after we sold these properties or whatever, that money would be used to buy other properties within the tax sale. I think it should, supposed to roll back over to acquire properties, not continue to go every year and purchase properties. I think we need to get rid of the ones we have. And you know, it took a while for the receivership. I'm learning this stuff. If it takes a while to trace everybody back, my opinion, I wouldn't buy any more properties until we got the money from we could probably make a sale with some of them, some of the property, because some of them are buildable lots, correct?
Yes.
And then the ones that you couldn't do it, maybe you could donate or make a park. But that's the understanding I had, that the money we got, that we would buy properties that way.
Correct. There's just a period of time where there's a rate of redemption when you buy something at tax sale, where the owner can come back and redeem that property. That's why there is a lag of time.
Okay.
And I believe that the mayor did not want to lose the opportunity to purchase some of these properties. You know, for example, 413 Patterson Avenue, that's one that's been sitting in a very dilapidated state for a long time. It's been a problem property. It's been a draw of services for us. We've spent thousands of dollars in upkeep on that property, cutting the grass, removing trash, and it's been an attractive nuisance. People have been busting the windows out, and we have to keep boarding it up. So it's actually been costing the city more money than it would be in paying the taxes to try to redeem it.
Now, 321 Delaware Avenue, I'm familiar with that house. I'm familiar with the family and everything, and that was a reverse mortgage thing, I think. And I don't think she wanted to leave, but she had to, if I'm not mistaken.
The right of redemption is 364 days, or is it a year?
It's a year.
I would refer to Mark for
complete-
It's a
that.
year. And
Yeah, they, we can't do anything for 6 months, and then they have the right to redeem it for, Pete's the one who's actually been working on it, I swear it might be another year and a half.
a
Yeah,
year
Really
and a
have
half,
long.
yeah.
They have a, yeah, they have a long time that they can redeem it.
So-
We have to wait 6 months to do anything, but once we file suit, we go through the legal process, and if they pay it off at any time before the order is entered, then they get to keep it. So most of these properties, though, have so many liens on them, they're not attractive to your average buyer. So I think ultimately we will get them. The reverse mortgage situation that Ms. Shields described is typical. You have a person going to a nursing home or something like that, and they just abandon their house. And it's getting to be a major problem, not just here, but in communities all over the country.
So
Part of
having
that-
this as being
sorry.
a self-sustaining fund is not
Not
realistic for at least X number
It
of
would
years.
take years
That's
for it
right.
to become self-sustaining, yes.
And it will, it's just gonna take, it's gonna take a few years for it to get to that point, but once it does, it'll
It'll work out.
And there will
work
have to be,
out.
there will have to be funding like this for the next X number of years
Right.
until we
And-
get to that point.
Right, and once the mayor presents his PowerPoint, if that's gonna help discuss that further and get into that more. Like, for example, 414 Elizabeth Street, if you go down the 400 block of Elizabeth Street,
Mhm, I used to live there.
almost that whole block right there are nothing but boarded up homes that have just been
Yep.
left. 414, we have done nothing but continuously take care of that property, cut the grass, clean up trash, board it up. And this is one of those that the property owners just walked away from.
And these are not agency-owned, these are individually owned.
They had one
Individually
homeowner
owned.
on that block.
Often a deceased owner, and so we have to, go through the process of notifying the next of kin and all that.
Are you able to add the legal fees that the city incurs into the cost of redemption?
When we buy it as a purchaser, the answer is no. In other words,
Okay.
when what we end up paying becomes what we pay for the property. And those costs, you can,
But if they come back and
if
redeem
they
it at the
did
last
redeem
minute.
it, the answer is yes, you do add all
Yes,
that
right.
in.
Okay.
But if they don't redeem it, then we end up eating
Right,
the cost that we put out.
But if they redeem it, then we're getting
Then
that back.
we get our
We're
money
wasted
back
it.
because they pay the taxes and the attorney's fees for pursuing it.
Okay.
That's correct.
And what you were just, Ms. Shields, just what you were just talking about a little bit earlier, our partnership with SNHS and Habitat for Humanity. Once we become the owner, this is also something that we could donate to them, so it could be a viable property again. So, we could use our services from Public Works to demo the property at a fraction of the cost of demoing it through a contractor, third-party contractor, because we could demo it for a few thousand
Yeah, I know.
versus demoing it for 10 to 15,000 and then donate the property, and then they could rebuild it.
But
So-
if that becomes a donation, then it is not a self-replenishing fund.
Correct, but we just have different options as far as having the property being viable again and back on the tax
Correct.
rolls. So we just have different options as far as it could go back on the tax rolls, it could go back to being a new single-family dwelling if we wanted to go into that route. There's just different options again. Rather than it sitting in a deplorable state, because at some point, and I'll remind you of 311 Delaware Avenue, that house actually started demolishing on itself. It was falling in on itself, if you're next to the police department. And that's what these houses are gonna start doing. We can't have,
Cave in.
and we had to do an emergency board up, so we had to very quickly find $15,000 out of the city's general fund to demo that house, and that's what we can't do. Because that was $15,000, and right now we're asking for about roughly 45. So it's either we be proactive now, or we scramble at the last minute looking for emergency board up funds.
Right.
I'm sorry, emergency demolition funds,
Right,
so.
pay 15
We're-
to demo
Right.
it and still have a vacant lot that we don't own
Exactly.
and can't do
So
anything
we're just
with.
trying to be proactive on the forefront with these properties.
Yeah, the ones that you buy at tax sale, because the city owns that property, you can dispose of that property any way you see fit. Whereas the receivership properties, you have a trustee-type duty to the landowner, so you can't just give it away or build, or do what you want with it. You have to sell it in a commercially reasonable fashion and give them back any excess money and all that stuff.
These are the properties that are on that edge of becoming an issue, and we just need to do something before that just
They're
goes in.
built, actually buildings that you're talking
They
about.
are. These are structures.
Can I see?
Okay.
Yeah, these are not vacant lots, these are actually structures, vacant buildings.
Okay, well, if the mayor isn't prepared to make the presentation, okay, thank you.
I was just taking my time with the media as you did.
Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
I barely spoke to you during the last item, and you made implications that I was being rude to you. I will not tolerate that kind of
If you would like
treatment.
someone else
I
to
am-
lead the meeting so that we could go through this smoothly, I would
No, I
appreciate
am
that.
doing just fine, thank you. I would appreciate the respect that I have earned and
Hey,
deserve, thank
hey,
you.
Hey,
I'm smiling at you, I
hey,
don't understand.
hey.
So we do have this
Terry,
presentation.
Let's go do this presentation, please.
Basically,
Here you go.
and I apologize if I make reference to the last issue on the agenda, because I believe that that issue is what leads us to these next two issues on the agenda. Vacant, abandoned, boarded up, all these houses. Again, negative effect on property values, negative effect on public health and safety, attracting other nuisances through the fixing broken windows theory, the public liability, again, a burden on services, the police, the fire, the neighborhood services, having to go to the same places over and over and over. Again, it reduces our revenues when we talk about the assessable base, and if we didn't do it in the last meeting, leading to people deciding that they don't want to live next to these things. I actually believe that this is the more important meeting than the one we had previously, but I will say to you that I believe that that meeting, those properties are the ones that end up on this list. So now I've come to you to ask you if you'll help me figure out a way to deal with these properties. So if we'll go on, again, you do have receivership. We now have two properties that have finally gotten receivership. The one, of course, was at the corner of Union and North Division Street. The other one has been vacant since 2008 on West Philadelphia Avenue. Both times after prolonged neighborhood services having to deal with it. And the issues, of course, the one on North Division Street, the house next to it, had all the police issues as well. We finally got that because eventually nobody shows up when the property is just abandoned. This is what happened on West Philadelphia Avenue at 204, Susan, 204. The house was vacant. They kept paying the fees but didn't fix up the house. Tried very desperately to find the owner. Everybody goes missing. The other thing that we're finding is that people have a really great way of not being able to be served by the courts. They have the ability to open the front door where we think they live, and is Mr. Spees there? And Mr. Spees looks right at you and goes, I don't even know who Mr. Spees is. So we were lucky in this last section, this last one, that nobody from the family showed up and nobody from the bank showed up, and the judge finally said, you all can have this house. What I will say to you is waiting almost a decade is not something that we can continue to sustain. So let's keep going. Taking a look at the lists, and I have all these, and we'll give these to you. We can go.
Sorry.
So the current resources, again, neighborhood services and code compliant, 8,000 to 10,000 violations a year with 4 code enforcement officers and 1 nuisance officer. We do have vacant building registry. We have those. We have a foreclosed property registry. I don't believe that it gets all of them. We find new ones every single day. Building permits and inspections, because if the house is boarded up after a certain period of time, it comes out of the realm of neighborhood services and goes back into building. It ends up being a building code issue. The current development CDBG funds we do about $250,000, $300,000 a year off and on over the last 10. And then Habitat for Humanity, which is focused on certain neighborhoods, and then Salisbury Neighborhood Housing Services. And I want to reference them a little bit later. I know that they're gone, but this is not something that I haven't said to them but we'll talk about what we can do with them. So there's the 4 enforcement officers for over 10,000 properties. There's no specific point person for vacants, boarded up, foreclosed, abandoned, and then some of these end up being on all of the same lists. Some of them don't end up on the same list. So it becomes a bit of a very large undertaking when you take a look at how many we have, and we're going to do that. We don't traditionally own property. We have tried to use that Baltimore receivership thing as a pass-through to get it to somebody who can do something with it, either the developer, SNHS, Habitat. And I'll suggest to you later on that if we were to take some of these properties at tax sale instead of letting them sit, as some of them have now for over 10 years, it gets it quicker back onto the property tax rolls. Now, the lack of revitalization in our neighborhoods on a large scale. Habitat is building about 2 homes per year. That is not keeping up with the number that are going vacant, going abandoned, going boarded up. Because boarded up has to be vacant, but vacant doesn't always mean that it's boarded up. You know how this goes. And then SNHS. Again, no large scale, and I would say to them, they're not here, but an incredible job over the last 5 years keeping some people in their homes. We've done that with CDBG funds for principal write-down, things of that nature. But in terms of a grand scale, like they do in large cities, we do not have the ability to do that, A, because of the lack of customers, B, the lack of capital that those two groups, I mean, those two groups are shoestring groups. We know this, we fund SNHS. And then in the change in the economy, trying to keep people in their houses, which is what SNHS basically is. They have turned into a counseling service. So here we have condemned, vacant, abandoned properties in Salisbury. Right now, that we know of, condemned houses, there are 63. Vacant houses, there are 187 that are just registered. Abandoned, left behind, intentionally or permanently, I don't know why there's not a number there, I apologize. And then foreclosed is 167. So as not to raise my ire from the last meeting, but if you take the issues that people are facing in our neighborhoods and then you put all of these on top of that, I would say that we've gotten to a point where we need to approach things a little differently. So that is why, so after demolition, so this is what we have. This is what I'd like us to do. And I kind of wish we had done the two things in a different order, because I think asking you all to consider the CDC goes right into this list of properties that I'm going to send you and ask you to put money aside to get them to do something with. The difficulty is this, is that regardless of how many properties are on the list we're asking for, Susan?
12.
There are 12.
Excuse me, Mayor.
I'm sorry.
I don't-
Do you want to come up here?
I don't have any, yeah, that would be helpful. I don't have any issue with commingling the two of those, I mean, because they
Okay.
are very interrelated.
Yeah. The difficulty is this, is that even with saying let's create some kind of CDC, this doesn't have to be the $323,000 one we were talking about 10 years ago. It can be on a much smaller basis, but we need to give someone the ability to focus solely on each one of these very intricate, different properties. You roll up on one and it's abandoned, but there's tax sale issues. So is it better to let it sit like this or come up with that fund that I had put into the budget, the $500,000 bond, to be able to get it, to buy it at tax sale, demolish it if it needs to be, demolish it if it is condemnable and unsafe, or if it can be given to Habitat to fix up, or it's in good enough shape so that SNHS can do it. That is really where we are. The difficulty for us at this point is that each one of them has a completely different set of situations. So let's go on to the next one. What I'm saying to you is that there's options for if we take it down. It could be a community garden.
Splash park.
It could be, well, yes. you know that lot, Councilwoman Mitchell and I were there on that lot, and we know that that eventually will be a house, but right now, they're waiting until they can grow some capital in the organization, and eventually that lot will become a home.
This is all new territory for me. What, if I can put it in terms, business terms, what's got the biggest bang for the buck?
The biggest,
Is
right,
it the,
letting it sit there is a harmful effect to our accessible base. There we go.
Agreed.
So the question becomes this, can you go to the next one for me? So the $500,000 bonded debt used over 3 years. The community development position specialist is grade 9. It utilizes funding to execute neighborhood revitalizations initiatives to the city, coordinates with the proper city departments, because there are times that it is with Mrs. Phillips, and then it crosses back over to Bill, and then sometimes it crosses back over. We need to work with nonprofits, Lake Salisbury Neighborhood Housing Services, and Habitat for Humanity to take lots that are sitting there, if they're large enough, be able to sell them and get them to build on. The difficulty is this. And I keep thinking that slide's coming, Julia. I keep thinking it's coming. So let's take some examples. This is the first house on the right-hand side, right across from the back of the Chesapeake Inn. 111 East Philadelphia, taxes owed, assessed values 51, 29 code violations. That's sitting there. If the police have to go to it and the code enforcement officers have to go to it for $502 of that $500,000 over the next 3 years, would it be better to go ahead and purchase that, either tear it down because if it needs to come down, or rehab it and get it back on the tax rolls? It's not going to take us long to recoup $502. The next one, Delaware Avenue, taxes owed $648, the assessed value. I don't want to say that that one should be torn down because there are circumstances and there are criteria that I may not see. Just look, you ride by it, you go, why didn't somebody tear that down? But if there is a rehabable possibility, that's what this person in the CDC is going to determine for us. 39 code violations. Patterson Street, taxes owed $11,000, assessed value 56, 55 code violations. The hardest thing that we have, the biggest hurdle that I'm trying to get over right now is that even if tonight you said, Jim, go get all the houses in Salisbury that are up for tax sale that you can get so that we can get them back on, is the right of redemption period is still
18 months.
It's still 18 months long. So when our neighbors who live next door to that Delaware Avenue house say, Jim, you got to do something with this, even if I could roll over there today and say, council and I, we didn't agree on one, but we agreed on the other tonight, we're going to get it. Still 18 months that property has to sit there and wait. I believe that the list of properties that I'm going to ask you to set money aside for are the ones that we believe are sitting there for a very long. No one has bought it at tax sale. We do not believe that someone's going to show up out of nowhere 11 years after it was abandoned. We believe that those people are gone. Now, if they do, or the bank shows up, but I think letting these things sit, doing what they're doing to the other property value around them is not a very good idea. I do have,
Can I ask a question?
yeah,
If you show up at Mr. Spee's door and you look like you're trying to serve a summons, he's probably going to say, I've never heard of the man. But if you show up at his door trying to buy the property at something in between the assessed value and the value at tax sale, he's probably going to say, yeah, I'm him. I'm Mr. Spees. Let's talk. And
but the
then
court
we don't
requires
have,
us to serve them.
but then it's an outright purchase, though. It's not a tax sale. It's prior to tax sale, and it's an outright purchase. And we avoid the 18 months. We avoid the thousands of dollars in legal fees and a whole lot of other things. They're out from under the house that they've already abandoned, assuming there's no bank in the mix there.
Yeah, but the only
Right,
problem with that
but
is-
they're no longer on the hook for the money, they're no longer, you know, in
I
it.
think that what you're describing is yet another, and I cannot stand that I'm using this from Bad Gillis from earlier, another tool in the toolbox that this particular fund and this particular position says, now granted, almost all of this comes back to you anyway for approval because it's money. So we'll always have that extra layer of discussing as a group what we should be doing with our most egregious properties. But Laura, that is, I don't want to say that's Jack's plan B from before, but there it is. There's another.
Striking that balance
There's-
between the
yep.
costs we're gonna put in it to get it and the
Our
time
problem is
we're
we
losing
can't
on
find
it.
anybody.
The,
But
le-
what
the
I'm saying-
problem,
That's what I'm saying.
Go ahead.
part of the problem is the, legal title. The guy who's gonna answer the door is likely to be the grandson of the woman who owned the property. No estate's ever been opened. There may be a lien, from the state of Maryland for nursing home bills. When you do a tax sale, you can wipe out a lot of that stuff. So the real advantage is you're getting to wipe out tons of debt. You're getting the court to do what they call an in rem action, so that even if you can't find the owner, if no estate's been opened, the court declares us the owner of that property. After the average, one of the biggest costs in that, I think we estimated for some of these, it might be as high as $6,000 to go through the legal process, but the cost of advertising alone is nearly $2,000.
Right.
You know, it's just outrageous. And,
You got to advertise 6 times.
yeah.
And I understand with a number of these, that's going to be the only remedy, that's going to be the only
Yeah.
option. But I
Some of
have to
them it
think
will
that
be.
some
That's
of
why
them,
I
there's a
just-
shorter route and a less
You're right.
expensive route.
If we can find an owner who just
That
isn't
we're not
paying
even
his
looking at.
taxes and buy it from him, that might be perfect.
And I apologize, the list you have in your packet has the 12 that we are considering. No, it's in,
Yes.
it's
In
in,
the
it's in
council.
your council packet.
Oh, yeah, okay.
It's
And
the last
I'm,
page.
I'm afraid that we put the assessed value on there, but we didn't put the, so from memory, what is owed at tax sale on these is
It's 45,
it's
the
$45,000.
total.
And there were a couple that were being removed from this list,
Well,
right?
you know, when you take a look at Cross Creek Drive,
And Fuller.
Right.
you
And
know,
Fuller,
those,
too.
those are in highly desirable neighborhoods, but they are still causing
Problems.
There's still a broken window.
there's still a broken window. And I don't know, we may find it easier to have this get sold than any of the others in any of the other neighborhoods. I don't know. All I know is that we have an opportunity, what I was asking for you all to consider tonight, and it was out of surplus, so I know that we had a little discussion about that earlier this evening.
You're doomed. Here it goes.
I know.
Got garlic?
But I would say that taking this money out of that and starting the process, we could wait, if you put it into the budget, the $500,000. Granted, that's only gonna be in July 1st, so that may only, but we have to decide whether or not we're gonna get into this business of really trying to drill down on these properties. And for $500, no one else is taking responsibility for it, so I feel it's our responsibility. And if we can quickly move it back to home ownership, or even back to rental, if somebody's paying the property taxes on it, and it is a contributing member of the neighborhood, I think that has to be a good thing. So I'm open to wherever you want to fund it, if you want to wait and do it in July, if you want to do it tonight. But all I can say is, for the people who are looking for remedies from us, the people who are looking for relief from us, the clock on the 18 months starts on the day that you do it. I think you're gonna get this money back. Even if you don't get your money back on this property, we're gonna stop servicing this property the way that we do, because we're having to cut the grass. We're having to send code
Stopping
enforcement
the
officers
bleeding.
out there,
Yeah,
stopping the
and
bleeding.
one board up could cost me $500. So we need to stop that.
Yeah, we've discussed that
Yeah.
at budget.
So
So can I
But then
just
we
do a
have-
what if?
Yes.
Can I do a what if?
Mm-hmm,
So, like the Cross Creek one,
mm-hmm.
that's included in the 45.
it is.
Could we, have it rehabbed and sell it for 120, 100?
In 18 months.
Right. I'll be honest with you, I wasn't necessarily thinking of profit. And that may be bad.
It's not profit.
Because
It's investment.
it's investment.
It pays for the
I didn't,
Future.
others.
I think,
Yes.
just like Laura's suggestion about going and find the person, this is another way of seeing, and we've got to find, if we fund that position to do this exclusive, because there are enough properties citywide to exclusively do it all day long. That's another tool in the toolbox. Is that a good way to go to recoup some of it? And that's the property to do it at, obviously,
Yeah.
because I don't see some of these other ones.
Legally, can we do that more?
When we buy it at tax sale, if it's a desirable property, we'll be
Right.
bidding against other investors. You're unlikely on a really desirable property to get it for a really low price. Most people who invest at tax sale are doing it as a speculative measure because they receive high returns for the money that they put in, and they want the homeowner to actually purchase it back. Sometimes that's a problem because you can have a homeowner who's totally irresponsible who will finally come through and buy it back, but you still have the problem where you end up cutting his grass and they don't pay their taxes next year. So you just have to wait and see how it shakes out. That's
But
really.
it can be done.
Yes, I mean
Okay.
theoretically, but to buy a house like the one you're describing, you're not getting that for $300 or $3,000. You're going to be bidding on that property maybe $40,000.
Right.
That property's going to sell for a much higher price.
What they're working on downstairs in internal services right now is the dates that all of these houses went, because there are gonna be some of these that have been sitting there for
Those are
an
the ones.
incredibly
That's
The
long
longer they're
time.
sitting there, the better the opportunity.
Yeah, it's important to know.
Nobody's come forward since then, and, just in not in a sneaky subversive way, but if somebody does finally come forward, once we get to this far, then we will have some sort of idea.
Then
of
we
who-
know
Right.
who's responsible.
Then we knew if Tim
And where
Spears
to
is at the
find them.
door.
Right,
Yeah.
and also, just a comment about the timing of doing this. Doing it in the budget means money is not available till July 1st, and we have missed this tax sale and the opportunity on these
That's-
properties for another year.
Yeah, yeah.
Unless
That's
we
that's
were
the
able to
only
find the
reason
person to buy
I
them.
was, I put the surplus thing on the board is that, I'm not exactly sure how often I thought tax sales happen, but it is only once a year.
So we miss
So
it
it's
till
once
next
a year, it's 12 months plus the 18 months after that. So if Susan, and I will just leave that discussion to you all, if you all want to do that number. Shoot, how long would it take if you read it, even if you got it to legislative session, it's still going to have to go through, is that an ordinance or a?
It's an ordinance, 2 readings,
So it's two.
but it
So we're,
we are up against the wall here. We have 2 readings, we have 2 meetings before tax sale.
So,
So it would have to be added on probably to the next meeting,
next Tuesday. Oh,
the 26th.
We're also looking at
And the
30
June
months
8th.
of maintenance on these
I
properties.
can
doing the
tell you,
maintenance anyway.
We're already doing the maintenance anyway.
We are,
I mean,
at a higher cost.
there's another one on Philadelphia, on New York, and I hate to reference Mrs. Smith Street again, but that one's been empty since 2007, and we went through this whole thing on right wing something or another that we were trying to take. There was a little old lady who lived in there. Water hadn't been on in almost 10 years, and it's sitting there vacant. But because it looks nice outside, we only had to go there a couple of times, it can sit. But I really think Mr. Hollins has sent out, where'd Bill go? Mr. Holland has just sent out a huge mailing to the ones that are boarded up, saying, this is how long, I have to have some sort of plan from you now. He has gotten back some good news from the Wycomico Housing Authority that they have come into some federal money. Now, as a point to try and make look like I'm smiling when I don't want to, I'll believe it when I see it. I'm smiling when I said
They
that.
took the 2 doors down on
Right.
Lake Street.
Did they really?
They took the 2 doors down on Lake Street.
What they-
fixed one up on West
Good,
Street.
good. So we do have some movement. He has to, and this is where it becomes really, staff has to decide. If he goes up to a house that's boarded up and has been boarded up longer than the 6-month period that it is supposed to, he has to ask them to let him see the inside, because if the inside is uninhabitable, then the house has to be condemned. Hence why they don't want to let Mr. Holland inside. So Oh, Jack, you kill me. I want to say to you, if there was a way to sit these people down and work with them, as you suggested in the last meeting, I would do that. But I can tell you this much, these people are really hard to find.
They're hard to find because they're mortgage companies. Most of them, see, because
Yeah.
the one on 329, I know, she's a member of my church.
Yeah.
She didn't abandon her property. She grew up in that house. She didn't want to leave that house.
Right, but it's the bank that has
But
it now.
the bank has it.
That has not completed the
And
foreclosure.
Susan,
It's a
Mrs.
reverse.
Phillips has this issue. The Smiley's house on West Philadelphia. I know these because that's the neighborhood association. They're everywhere. But the bank, we call and say, look, everything's falling down. The garage is falling down. The inside is hoarded. Stuff is crumbling. The structure is crumbling. And the bank says, we'd like to help you. Here's who you contact. So we contact them, and we put the little things outside the QR codes now, so you call them yourself. And we get, thank you, Mrs. Phillips. We understand the degree of the situation. This is what we plan to do. We're going to go get a contractor. And then you don't hear anything for 6 weeks, 7 weeks, 8 weeks. So then I have to go to Susan. Hey, Susan Carey just called me and said, what are you doing in that house across the street? So Susan calls again. And the bank says, oh, Mrs. Phillips, thank you so much for calling us. We really want to work with the city. And we wait. We are hoping in this one particular case, but we can't do this piecemeal, one by one. We've got to get control of these properties
Yeah.
to be able to move fast.
Well, to that end, I'm thinking back to certain commercial property on 13 that we did the same dance with for a long, long time. And we got an order of demolition, and then there was action. Surprise, surprise. And we don't have to wait to own these properties via tax sale or however else. If it is condemned and it has sat for a long period of time, perhaps getting that demolition order is the spark that lights the seat to move.
That will be the determination of the building inspector when he has gotten access. You have to see inside of it, don't you, Bill?
No, if you could tell from the outside that the roof's falling in, I would think.
Well, yeah, that's easy. They're not all that easy. Yeah. So, again, it's I hate to use this term, wraparound services. Wraparound services for the issues that we have. And who can get us the exact number that can go on this sheet?
After we take off, are we
It's in the
taking?
budget amendment, I thought.
Is it in the
Oh,
budget
yeah,
amendment?
it's
Is it
in
the-
there. Oh,
I-
it's-
I-
yeah.
All the properties you want to do this year?
45,
This
Yeah, it is.
is,
It's
if we were
45.
to take the 500,000 and we were to hire the person to do the CDC, this truly, to start, is gonna have to be, because when we do an ad for that, what we're looking for is a skill set that is going to be very micro-targeted. Honestly, it's gonna be very, and I think with these are the ones that are owed the least at tax sale. These are the ones I think we could do something with the fastest, and when I say fastest, I mean plus 18 months. But I think that gives that person, these I do believe represent a whole host of different scenarios. Some of them are in this category, some of them are in that category. It will give that person a broad brush stroke of all the different things. That being said, I do not want to say you can't have one without the other. If you want to do this, we will figure out a way to make this work with the existing staff we have. And Susan's giving me, I can see behind her eyes now, I cannot believe you just said that out loud. But we do need to get this started. And if you are generous enough to be able to provide that position in the budget as your last couple deliberations come, that would be wonderful. But if not, and we just choose to do this, if we think we've spent what we can spend, we will figure out a way to make it work. So I just want you to know that my confidence is we'll get to it one way or the other. The position would be nice, but I think it's more important to go start getting these properties and moving them in the direction of being a contributing member to the assessable base.
Just to throw one more tool in the toolbox, if it is not a property that is condemned or eligible for demolition or application for demolition, I'm not sure what the criteria for applying for receivership is, but if the banks have or whomever has walked away from the property and we are maintaining it and they are doing nothing, even if it is not at the point where it is condemned, if we were to make application for receivership, I would think that would be an impetus as well.
If that leaves more money in the pot for the ones that we have to go and get at tax sale, that's terrific too.
Yes.
I think whoever that person is, or if it's Mrs. Phillips and Mr. Hedger, that they're going to learn to navigate through all of the different scenarios, and ultimately will probably all come back to us, you know, for approval. So we'll have our eyes, all of our eyes and ears on the situation as well. And again, those suggestions, yours, certainly Jack's, all of those things, you know, are ways that we can tackle the problem. I would just open it for any of the legal issues that we may face that I have not mentioned, and I will yield to you if that's okay, Ms. Mitchell, because there's always a legal something or another that goes on.
Some reason we can't do it the way we want to do it.
It's, and I think we've pretty much discussed everything. I think the only thing you need to keep in mind is that receivership is going to be the right choice if in the end you might sell it to the highest bidder and try and get it back on the tax rolls. But if you've really got a disaster property, buying it at tax sale might be because you won't be able to find anybody to buy it. And that way you'll be able to control what happens to it in the end because it will belong to the city.
Let me ask again, not knowing much about tax sale, who goes? Who goes with Mr. Cordry? Does he go with the checkbook?
Yeah, you
Who
can,
went the last time?
anybody,
Who went the last time? I'm not sure.
anybody can bid on behalf of the city with your authorization, so.
All right, I just want to
Yeah,
make sure I've got that.
I'm not sure who did that last time.
Yeah.
I mean, they had the authorization to spend up to X number of dollars for the 5 properties we were considering. One, I think, was paid before the sale, and we bought the other 4
Right.
within that,
Good.
within that.
And it's, just for the
limit.
public's edification, it's $45,357.
But that includes the 2 that are
important thing is
being
just to make
removed,
sure that
correct?
whoever's
Which
gonna-
2 did we remove? I apologize.
Fuller
Talked
and-
about Fuller Lane and Cross Creek Drive.
So move those.
So the number will change slightly, but are there any more questions, or is there consensus to move this forward to the May 26th legislative session,
Purchase
excuse me,
these property tax.
for these properties at tax sale?
Yes.
Or as many as we can get out of that amount of money?
I had no problem.
Just from a philosophical standpoint, it does reflect a change in how we see what's happening to us. And I don't want to say proactive or reactive, because that sort of indicates that the people who came before us weren't trying to be proactive, and I don't believe that in any way, shape, or form. But it does represent a saying that we're going to try and go and change our destiny, change our direction in that way by taking up these properties that are sitting there for so long.
Well, to answer your question verbatim versus what you intended to ask about who buys these at tax sale, you were asking from the city's perspective, but if the city's not there or somebody else is not there bidding on these, it's the investment property owners. It's the people that are buying it to turn it into a rental. And I believe that this is one of those solutions to the problem we were discussing earlier, and that is to make sure that they get into the hands of people who can put them back into the hands of people who are going to own them and live in the
These
home.
been over here for years, the investment property owners are not here.
They don't even want them.
They don't want them.
Right, right.
So.
But, well, the couple of those, they would. As
Oh, yeah,
Mr.
but
Tillman
those-
said, the ones
the two-
that were,
those
that's
two,
who you're gonna
yeah.
be bidding against, and those are the ones that, so if we start now being proactive and getting these cleaned up, but then going forward, we're not letting them get to this point before we're doing that, I think that is a long-term proactive solution.
It is, and the Elizabeth Street,
I
414.
was just looking at
yeah.
Elizabeth Street.
Between,
I lived
between Railroad Avenue and Church, there's that small block, and there's quite a few abandoned, boarded-up houses. If you take, and we're working on the rest of them, but if you take that one, and if you fix that one up, that's just the beginning. And if we, with the CDI, we work on the remainder of those through receivership, habitat, what have you,
Any which way we
we
can.
will have worked up, we will revitalize that whole block. That is going to ramp up the property value
Exactly.
tremendously in that area. So what you've done is you've driven away the crime element, everything out of that area, just that there. So you've taken that block and you've revitalized it
Just by one.
tremendously. But that's
You
where
gotta
it
start with
starts,
one.
with that one
Right.
right there.
idea, just take my brain, if Habitat, because they're in so many projects.
Exactly.
They're one street over.
So
Exactly.
guess what?
And they're,
You've got Emmanuel Wesleyan Church,
mm-hmm,
that's been adopted street,
Drop
adopted
the
block.
Yep.
That may be a project they may want to look into if we receive the house and maybe donate it to them,
yeah.
fix up for somebody or
Right.
whatever.
It's
or
gotta
sell
start
or whatever.
somewhere.
And Jack, in the
Yeah, I was
spirit of
thinking
what you
about
said
that.
before, there's one house that burned right there on the other, it's catty corner to this
Yeah,
one.
it is, yeah.
And we were over there the other day, right before the community gardens thing, looking at it, and it looks as if the rental company, and we're not,
It, I
the
talked
rental
to Molly.
company is inquiring as to, and there's pluses and minuses, inquiring as to whether or not they can just give this to Habitat for Humanity and they could tear it down, or whether it's quick enough for us to tear it down. I only worry, and I should probably not say this, but I only worry that if we start to take their responsibilities off of them, they will see that they need to do less. So I'm gonna watch that one very carefully to make sure that A, we don't get in the way of progress, but B, we don't allow an out.
Don't become enablers.
Exactly.
It-
Unintended consequences.
That looks
Unintended,
promising. I talked to Molly Hilligoss today. That looks promising.
Some of
It's
it,
for 27 Elizabeth.
yeah, we have that other property as well that we just accepted as a donation from Wells Fargo Bank.
Yep.
Some of these that are with the banks, perhaps they're willing to do that and just make that donation that
And
they
we-
can write off against their
And
losses,
I will make
and
the
we're
plea
done.
for that position. I'm not exactly sure whether or not the director and the deputy director have the time to catalog them all, put them into their categories, contact, and I think that they are very good at coming to me and going, this is what we found, the inspector found this is where it is, this is where Bill says it is. But there's so many to find. I don't know. So when you go back to those deliberations, as I said before, it would be a blessing to me to be able to fund that position, to have that. And we have worked very hard as to where we put that person so that they can be the most proactive and quickly responding to your inquiries, my inquiries that will come all day, and inquiries of the neighborhood, plus building that relationship with Habitat and SHS, and knowing how to do tax sale. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that will go into that.
One of the things that was requested at the budget meetings, in addition to the plan outline, was a job description. Do we have?
If you go back, Julie.
Susan, what was that second property? Fuller Lane was off of.
Cross Creek. Cross Creek.
was?
There's only 3 bullets on here, but we have a full.
There it is. This is from the job description, but we'll have the job description in the packet for you. Well, no, you just need that for budget.
Budget
Okay.
Thursday, yeah,
I'll have
our
it
last
tomorrow.
budget
You
meeting
got
is
it?
Thursday.
We'll have it tomorrow.
Awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, if you could just email that to council, that'd be great.
Thank you all so much for this
Thank you.
discussion.
I just want you to know
Go ahead.
that I am open-minded and I am the most positive person, and far be it from me, but I would support the 45,000. I would support the 45,000.
The budget.
It's a smart
I would do.
move.
It's a bargain.
Mr. Speeds, you're in support. Okay.
It's a great Plan B.
I would too.
You were gonna get that.
That just moved to Plan A. Okay, so we have council consensus to move this forward to the, Kim, can we still get that on the May 26th agenda? Yeah. With the adjusted amount? Because those 2 properties are coming off.
Which ones are coming up? Because I thought we just didn't include those originally.
No, Ms. Phillips,
Are there 14 on there?
the 45,000 number you said had the 2 properties, Fuller Lane and,
Make sure you get an accurate number,
What was the other?
An accurate number, an accurate cost.
an accurate number and an accurate list. How about that?
hold on one second, it
Email
was
that to you.
That's fair.
Cross
That's
Creek
easy.
and Fuller Lane.
That's easy. That's not like 100-page report.
That's not, yeah, sifting through. I had a request for a comment from Mr. Sarbanes, but I don't think that he's here any longer,
He
so,
left long ago.
yeah. And that was on this topic, so.
This we're going further discussion.
Yes, yes. The community development position and this we'll talk about on Thursday as we wrap up. Okay. Wrap up our budget discussions on Thursday. That is it. We are adjourned. Thank you. Have a good night.
Don't we have more to do?
I need food.